What diseases or conditions are you most worried about getting as you age? I can tell you what you should be most worried about based on statistics, which is metabolic dysfunction such as prediabetes and cardiovascular disease such as high blood pressure and damaged blood vessel linings. But if you're like most women I've talked to, you'd probably say you're most scared of getting cancer, Alzheimer's, and living in chronic pain. But did you know that there's a ton you can do to tip the odds in favor of not getting those three conditions? Most of what most people think they know about these three conditions is actually wrong, which is great because when you know better, you can do more to create the future you want for yourself. You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 198, How to Not Get the Three Scariest Diseases of Aging. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hey, and welcome to another episode. So happy to be here with you today. You're so fabulous. I hope you're having such a great week. Did you have any fight-throughs this week? I think recognizing a fight-through moment as such can give you a lot of power you didn't realize you had to step up and do the hard right thing. And anticipating that there will be these hard fight-through times along the journey does so much to set you up for success. That's like you. Today we're going to talk about deciding not to get the three common diseases of aging that are the most frightening to most people: Alzheimer's, cancer, and chronic pain. Of course, none of us know what's in our future, and you can make a lot of healthy choices and still have some really bad luck. Unfair, mascara-streaked tears running down your face kind of horrible luck. But I do believe we can tip the odds in our favor with the choices we make now, and that doing so is both worth the effort and can be tremendously enjoyable. Each of these three topics can be explored more comprehensively on their own episodes. Episode 74, Choose Not to Get Alzheimer's. Episode 94, Can You Avoid Cancer? And episode 61, Choose Not to Have Injuries and Pain. I'm not under the illusion that aging is going to be easy or that the goal of life is to only do easy things. I also think that making some choices that take some extra effort and feel hard at first right now will give you options that make your life feel way easier in the future. It's a choose your hard situation. You know, I love that phrase. If you're up for not being normal by choosing the harder options now, you'll develop more character and mental strength along the way to creating a life where you're more likely to be able to do the things that matter to you 40 years from now. There's a book by Dr. Dale Bredesen called The End of Alzheimer's. In this book, Dr. Bredesen describes why, despite billions of dollars of research trying to find one, no single drug or treatment has ever worked for Alzheimer's. And it's not because the patients can't remember that they got treated for Alzheimer's. He describes it like this. A home has been pummeled with baseball-sized hail. The storm left 36 holes in the roof. Roofers come and to great expense do a great job fixing a single hole. They're baffled by rainwater continues to flood the house. They did their very best work fixing that hole, but they didn't realize that they left the other 35 holes. Dr. Bredesen has identified 36 different contributors to whether something called amyloid precursor protein gets cut into 4 pieces, because that leads you down the path to Alzheimer's disease, or if amyloid precursor protein gets cut into 2 pieces, and that leads you down the path to preventing Alzheimer's. It's possible that a few more than these 36 things that he has already identified could be discovered over the next few years, but if you can fix most of the 36 contributors, amazing things happen. Things that drug companies would make billions of dollars from if they could do it with a single pill. But they can't. I'd encourage you to get the book The End of Alzheimer's if you want to learn more about this. The point is that you have to figure out what's most problematic for you and target those specific issues in order to prevent or reverse cognitive decline. Maybe you don't even have 21 of the 36 potential causes. Great. You can specifically focus on the 15 highest leverage areas for you. He lists out 3 types of Alzheimer's in terms of the cause, and each one focuses on repairing the roof holes, so to speak, of that specific type of dementia. There are specific lab tests that can help you figure out which type you're susceptible to and what your priorities should be. The 36 roof hole fixes are roughly categorized 3 ways: preventing and reducing inflammation, optimizing hormones, trophic factors, and nutrients, and eliminating toxins. There's so much good stuff in each of those categories. The one about hormones is especially interesting. It has to do with your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, but especially the most important hormone, which is insulin. You pump out a lot of insulin after eating sugars and simple carbohydrates, which is what your body is supposed to do to take care of that, but your body needs to be able to eventually degrade your insulin so that your blood glucose doesn't go too low. It does this with an enzyme called insulin degrading enzyme, abbreviated IDE, insulin degrading enzyme. And guess what else IDE degrades besides insulin? Amyloid, that plaque that tends to build up in your brain when you get Alzheimer's. What? Obviously, it can't degrade both of them at once. So if IDE is always busy breaking down insulin because there's so much insulin, it never gets around to being able to break down amyloid. By constantly eating carbohydrates, we're constantly producing insulin, and when we're constantly producing insulin, we're preventing the cleanup of amyloid from our brains. Some people call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, so I always knew there was a metabolic connection, but I didn't know this insulin degrading enzyme thing before. Super interesting. There's a lot more to Alzheimer's than just that insulin piece, but it's a very important part. What you choose to put in your mouth and when matters a lot, even to your brain. I can help you get a doable plan running on autopilot to make sure you're not missing the opportunity to clean out your amyloid. It's absolutely worth your effort. Episode 74, Choose Not to Get Alzheimer's, has all kinds of other information for you, but something else I think it's important to remember is that you don't just get Alzheimer's one day, like how 1 minute you don't have strep throat and then the next minute you do. Has that ever happened to you? It's happened to me at like 3:22 p.m. I was shopping for groceries and completely fine. And at 3:23, I was a basket case and could barely get myself and my groceries home because I got strep throat like that. It was crazy. Anyway, the cognitive decline comes on slowly, but from the time you or your loved ones start to notice subtle changes, you've probably had these disease processes running for around 20 years. 20 years. That means that the time to prevent the appearance of senior moments in your 60s or 70s is right now. That's a big deal, and it's totally doable. Despite how addressing 36 causes sounds, some simple changes can be profoundly beneficial, and the side effects of making those changes are decreased susceptibility to almost all other diseases, and it gives you increased self-confidence. You can't say that for Aricept, Exelon, or Namenda. I hope that you choose not to get Alzheimer's disease. I know for a fact that the 2042 world needs you firing on all cylinders. Alzheimer's disease isn't just the deposition of amyloid plaques in your brain. There's a lot more to it than that, and it's not unpreventable or irreversible. It comes from your body doing its best to protect you from inflammatory insults, toxic compounds, suboptimal trophic factors, suboptimal nutrient levels, or suboptimal hormone levels. Those protective measures your body uses to protect itself from toxins and inflammation and other immediate threats cause that APP to be cut into 4 segments instead of 2. And that's what leads your brain down the path of pruning back synapses faster than new ones can be made or current ones can be maintained. But our bodies are smart and they do the best they can with what we give them. Sometimes that leads to slowly progressing disease because the APP has to be cut into 4 segments instead of 2. But the choices we make now can help our bodies snip APP into just 2 segments, which helps prevent Alzheimer's in the future. it's worth the effort. Okay, what about cancer? Cancer is definitely the farthest thing from a straightforward medical issue either. But we often think of battling cancer as fighting a war against an army of ultra-powerful, immortal supercells that have gone rogue. That's pretty scary. Half of the U.S. population is affected by cancer in some way. 1,600 cancer patients die in the U.S. every single day. New cancer rates have steadily increased over the last 150 years. Half of all men and a third of all women in the U.S. are projected to develop cancer in their lifetime. On December 23, 1971, Richard Nixon declared war on cancer, and cancer rates have not improved since then. We knew that cancer was caused by DNA damage, and we all needed to figure out how we could better understand our DNA, and cancer would be a disease for the history books, like consumption or dropsy. In 2001, the human genome was partially sequenced. I was in pharmacy school then, and I remember it was a very big deal. It was going to solve the cancer conundrum. 24 years later, we know that it didn't, so why not? We know we have these sequential DNA mutations that cause cell machinery to become defective and start replicating cells too rapidly. So why can't we just find the genetic mutations and stop the madness? Cancer's really complicated. I'm not saying it's not, and I'm not any kind of expert, but I do think it's important for you to know that the traditionally accepted theory of what causes cancer isn't the only theory. It's called the somatic mutation theory, and I believe that it's wrong. You can decide what you believe. There's another theory of what causes cancer called the metabolic theory, and it's not some newfangled Gen Y idea. It started with an eccentric but brilliant German scientist named Otto Warburg, who discovered in 1924 that cancer cells have a weird method of generating energy. Instead of having their mitochondria create ATP from glucose and oxygen, they convert glucose to energy without the presence of oxygen. It's called anaerobic metabolism or fermentation. Otto Warburg postulated that this metabolic dysfunction was the origin of cancer. In 1924. Do you remember which cellular organelle produces ATP for energy? Yes, you're so smart. It's your mitochondria. Remember from episode 90 that metabolic health is mitochondrial health, and metabolic dysfunction is mitochondrial dysfunction. Otto Warburg, who showed that cancer is a disease of impaired metabolism, won the Nobel Prize in 1931. If you want to learn more about the history of scientific discovery and the ignoring of that discovery, I highly recommend the book Tripping Over the Truth by Travis Christofferson. It's a good one for really telling the story of research and the politics, I guess you'd say, of getting ideas recognized and funded and available to the population at large. I think you have a really good chance of getting yourself into the sadly shrinking group of people who will not develop cancer in their lifetime. Nothing is a guarantee, of course, but we have way more control than we're led to believe, and I think this should be a part of your aging plan. I highly recommend Natasha Winter's great book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, if you or anyone you love is affected by cancer or you just want to avoid it. Most people acknowledge that your lifestyle choices have a small effect on the development of some cancers. Like they know you're far more likely to get lung cancer if you smoke, right? But we're largely told that cancer is a combination of genetics and bad luck, neither of which you can do anything about. But actually, research shows that only 5 to 10% of cancers are caused by damaged DNA. 90 to 95% are not. I like Natasha Winter's definition of cancer, which is, cancer is a disease of genes mismatched with modern lifestyle. And also, cancer is about how our bodies and minds interact with the environment. Cancer is now known to be 200 to 300 different distinct diseases with different mutations, different causes, and different treatments. Along the way, Otto Warburg's theory was forgotten, dismissed, or silenced, depending on how pessimistic you are. The main point of the metabolic approach to cancer is that cancer isn't 200 to 300 different diseases, but a single disease of energy metabolism. No matter the location of the tumor or what DNA anomalies might exist in the cells, all cancers use fermentation, so that anaerobic respiration, it's also called the Warburg effect, to generate energy. It's not the normal thing to do. This dysfunction of energy production is common in all cancers, and it's something we can do something about, like for real. You've probably heard before that we all have cancer inside of us. It's just a matter of whether we get to a tipping point where those cells can get enough momentum to start going crazy and cause noticeable effects. If they don't, our immune system can get rid of them. Most cancers take years or at least months to develop. They're flying under the radar for quite a while at first. But our mitochondrial damage is flying under the radar for way longer before we start developing any cancerous cells. We are capable of creating energy to power our cells through both aerobic and anaerobic respiration, so that if we're ever in a position to need energy when we can't get enough oxygen, like running away from a dingo or doing Fran, that's a really hard CrossFit workout in case you're like, what? We can still generate a burst of power to get away, even without enough oxygen. That's what anaerobic respiration is all about. And as you probably remember from doing Fran or your last dingo chase or whatever you're into, when you generate energy anaerobically, there's a byproduct called lactic acid. That's why you can't sit down on the toilet seat for 2 days after a tough anaerobic leg workout. That's all part of normal adaptation. But when mitochondria are damaged, weird things start to happen. One of those weird things could be that the mitochondria in the cell might go to the anaerobic route, which creates 2 ATP per molecule of glucose instead of normal aerobic metabolism, which creates 38 ATP per molecule of glucose. That never happens when there's enough oxygen available because it's weird and it's less efficient, but it allows cells with tons of glucose available to them to produce 2 little ATPs per glucose over and over really quickly, allowing them to replicate really quickly. If you remember, anaerobic respiration also produces lactic acid as a byproduct. An acidic environment promotes angiogenesis, which we talked about in episode 34. Angiogenesis is the formation of new blood vessels. Something an aspiring tumor really needs is a good blood supply. The impaired mitochondria with the abundance of available glucose are well equipped to run anaerobic respiration even when oxygen is available, which helps the cells develop into cancer. All they need is a lot of glucose because they're only getting 2 ATPs per glucose instead of 38. It would be kind of like driving a 1973 Lincoln Continental instead of a Prius. You'd need a lot of readily available fuel and you'd be sucking it down like gangbusters. Natasha Winters says 80% of human cancers are driven by glucose and insulin. That's a lot, but it's not every single kind of cancer, which is important to be aware of because the only kind of cancer that really matters is the kind you or a loved one might get, right? And there's a 20% chance that it won't be entirely driven by sugar. But most cancers, 80% of them, ingest sugar 50 times faster than healthy cells. 50 times. Glucose and insulin stimulate proliferation and migration of all types of cancer. Ingesting any type of sugar, glucose, sucrose, fructose, honey, orange juice, agave, white bread, it feeds cancer and reduces the function of some immune cells by half for up to 5 hours. Whether you have cancer or not, you don't want to reduce the function of your immune cells by half for 5 hours every time you eat something. A typical American kid eats more sugar in 1 day than our ancestors could possibly eat in 2 years. And guess who loves that fact even more than PepsiCo or Hershey's or Smuckers? Cancer cells. Sugar is their favorite food, and it's what allows them to rapidly grow, reproduce, and invade. And here's something important Natasha Winters says in her book. No conventional treatment can affect cancer cells if sugar consumption remains high. Period. End quote. That's so important. 100% of cancer cells reprogram their metabolism to anaerobically make energy from glucose. If we forget about the fact that it's insane to ignore that as the most logical inroad for effective treatment, anyone's conventional cancer subtype specific treatment, usually chemo or radiation, is completely ineffective if sugar consumption remains high. According to the National Cancer Institute, $6.5 billion with a B was spent on cancer research in 2022. According to Dr. Nasha Winters, 95% of cancer spending is allocated to genetic research and 5% to prevention. That seems about par for the course in this country, unfortunately. Western medicine is all about identifying the genetic mutation that causes a pinpoint mechanism in one specific type of cancer so that they can develop a drug to affect that one mechanism. But our bodies are more like complex plants that can be trusted to flourish if planted in the correct conditions. When we provide our bodies with the optimal conditions, 80% or more of cancers are not going to be able to grow. Listen to episode 94 for all of the details, but a cancer-free environment includes blood sugar balance, toxin burden management, a healthy microbiome, a strong immune system, low inflammation, healthy blood flow, hormone balance, stress management, and emotional well-being. If you want a list of books about alternative approaches to cancer, I have a free list you can find on my website, www.healthcouragecollective.com, under free resources. I'll also put a direct link in the show notes if you want a list of books. Dr. Winters says, cancer researchers today are often frustrated because they get conflicting results when it comes to uncovering the causes of cancer. Some have proven it's a virus, some a bacteria, others toxins or radiation or genetic mutations, traumas or chronic stress. All of them are correct in that any of those events can lead to mitochondrial failure. End quote. Okay, and then what about our last one, chronic pain? None of us wants to be miserable, and I feel for people who are in pain all the time. But it feels like something that just happens to you, right? As we get older, we get better at accepting some pain that's intolerable to younger people. I think that's actually a good thing, and it comes with some wisdom. But a lot of the injuries and pain that we consider inevitable as we age is not. And the answer isn't more supportive knee wraps, more ergonomic keyboards, higher arch supports in our shoes, or chairs with taller back supports. Really. In his book, Pain-Free, anatomical physiologist Pete Egoscue says, pain is not a reflection of the body's inferior design, nor are pain and dysfunction the price we must pay for growing older, being women, jogging, swinging a golf club, or holding certain jobs. On the contrary, the body is responding in strict accordance with logic of its own musculoskeletal heritage. What's illogical is that we ignore the body's designs as we go about our daily lives and submit to medical treatment. Our musculoskeletal system would work just fine if only we would let it. End quote. Pete Egoscue has a whole treatment system, I guess you'd call it. I did 3 sessions with a virtual Egoscue therapist about 2 years ago or so, maybe a little more than that actually. So I got a little firsthand experience with an Egoscue clinician. The whole Egoscue program and philosophy are based on his premise that everyone's body requires the proper alignment of our 8 load-bearing joints: shoulders, hips, knees, and ankles. Since episode 61, I've been working in person with a fabulous and much more in-depth physical therapist named Christina to check my alignment and whether I'm compensating with weird movements or limited mobility, which I am, and we've been working on it. Pete Egoscue says dysfunction starts to creep in when there are non-parallel lines between those joints. Deviation from the standard design of the body is the source of pain and incapacitation. Most people have non-parallel lines, much more so now than 50 or 100 years ago. I know I do, and it's not always a problem, so that's why you need a specialist to help you look at it. But for the most part, the abnormal has become the new normal. Pete Egoscue believes that most chronic orthopedic conditions and injuries can be prevented. Hip replacements, knee replacements, arthritis, back pain, bad backs, carpal tunnel, bunions, sciatica, TMJ, bursitis, frozen shoulder, tendinitis, the list goes on and on. Not only that, but most injuries can be prevented. Not death by Taco Bell sign, obviously, but rotator cuff tears, ACL tears, tendinitis, bursitis, back strains, neck strains, even sprained ankles. Pete Egoscue says, tendinitis is not a diagnosis as much as it is a vague observation that you have swelling and pain. It's not a disease that you can catch like TB or the flu. It's not something you're genetically predisposed to or comes about by accident. It's a symptom of musculoskeletal misalignment. And, he says, carpal tunnel syndrome is not caused by what we do with our elbows, wrists, or hands. It's caused by what we don't do. They do not have access to the nuanced muscle power and biomechanical interaction required to stay healthy. There's no substitute for those functions. None. And, one of my favorite quotes from him, that's why the ergonomic redesign of the workplace and of garden tools, toys, and mattresses borders on fraud. Installing a wrist brace on a keyboard or raising the surface of a workbench only shifts the excess friction to another location in the worker's elbow, wrist, or hand. Ergonomic palliatives are just as deadly as overdosing on painkillers. End quote. Okay, I like him and I think his work is pretty life-changing, but even I think that last one's a little bit heavy-handed. A wrist rest being as deadly as overdosing on painkillers. So, what can we do to be abnormal and decide not to be one of the 35 million Americans with chronic musculoskeletal pain? To not have our nutritive motion restricted as we wait till we're, quote, bad enough to qualify for orthopedic surgery. Here are 4 takeaways that I've come up with that I think will help you drastically reduce your chance of future injury and chronic pain both now and in the future. The first one is to recognize that the site of the pain is very likely not the source of the problem. Hard to believe that an excruciating knee, especially one that shows clear diagnostic criteria upon imaging, isn't the problem. I mean, yes, it is a problem, and I want you to feel great, but it's not the source of the problem, most likely. It's probably a symptom of something bigger. Developing this skill of seeing the forest, not just the trees. Is that a thing? Do you know what I'm talking about? The opposite of not seeing the forest for the trees? You get what I'm trying to say. Of course, do what you need to take care of yourself and get rid of the pain, but also consider that this might just be a symptom of a broader issue. Same with high blood sugar or migraines or skin rashes or insomnia. What is this nagging problem trying to teach you? Even when very smart medical people tell you that you definitively meet the criteria for the diagnosis of a certain condition, it doesn't necessarily make you a certain kind of person or mean that that's the cause of the problem, because it might not be. Number 2, pain is your friend, or maybe your frenemy. Do you love the sound of car alarms? Can't imagine that there's anyone who would say yes to that. I've met a few people who say they like pain. Like, I used to work with this guy named Izzy who would spray alcohol in his paper cuts on purpose, and once he had a girl taser his calf because he liked pain. So weird. I'd much rather listen to a car alarm than taser my leg, but neither of them are welcome in my life. I feel like car alarms are kind of a normal background sound in our society, and we've all gotten pretty good at attempting to tune them out. Pain is like our body's car alarm. Heads up. Something's not right, but too often we focus on just muting or muffling the sound of the siren. You do have to do that to not go crazy, but if you don't want it to keep coming back, you need to find the source that keeps tripping the alarm system. Pediabetes says, I've never seen arthritis develop in a joint that was previously active and properly aligned. Never. Okay, and then number 3, we need more properly aligned motion. Pediabetes calls this design motion. We know that our current environment no longer gives us enough motion to keep us healthy. If you remember from our previous episodes, we want to keep moving through our full ranges of motion, and movement doesn't have to mean exercise. We need to keep our body's design requirements in mind as we move, otherwise our bodies start to improvise, and they have ancillary muscles start doing the job that our major muscles should be doing, and then the force of muscles pulling on our bones starts to come from the wrong places, and our car alarm will start going off. Annoying. While more movement is good for every cell in our body, it can't be just any movement. Grinding workouts might be actually making things worse because you're strengthening your dysfunctions. But so too would stopping all motion. The 4th takeaway is to recognize that your body is inherently able to heal itself. It's designed to work properly and be pain-free. We just have to give it the chance. I know, easy for me to say, I'm not in excruciating constant pain that prevents me from living a normal life. And I know some people are. I literally don't know what that's like. And I definitely don't want to be insensitive to people who are, because that's miserable. But there is hope, and I want you to know that your body is your ally, not your opponent. Thank you so much for listening today. You are so great, as always. I hope this episode gave you some useful ideas you can use to put more years lived in good health into your future. I thought these 3 topics went well together, not only because they all feel really scary, but because they all feel more out of our control to most people than they really are. I think there's some pretty widespread confusion about what causes Alzheimer's, cancer, and chronic pain in the first place. It's not what most of us have been led to believe. We've been looking in the wrong places for causes of all 3 of them, and the beginning of most causes of them starts years or decades before the diagnosis is made, meaning the time to do something to reduce your chances of getting any of them is today. By the time you see overt signs of these, you might be 10 to 20 years into the disease process. There are many causes that add up to create an outcome diagnosable as Alzheimer's, and many causes that add up to create an outcome of cancer, and several things combined that lead to a manifestation of a single chronic pain. Your insulin levels play a huge role in the development of Alzheimer's and cancer, and even a small role in the development of chronic pain. Constant ingestion of simple carbohydrates impairs your body's ability to clean out waste products that contribute to the development of Alzheimer's and cancer, and can contribute to the inflammation that is present in all 3 of these conditions. I think it's important to remember, too, that none of these 3 conditions are evidence of our body's poor design. quite the opposite. Our bodies are made to thrive, but when we force them into environments that are mismatched to their innate genius, they protect their most immediate vital functions at the expense of optimal longevity. But when we can learn to provide ourselves with the ingredients and environments that they crave, we can significantly reduce our chances of and/or drastically delay the onset of most of the chronic diseases of aging, including the scariest ones. And perhaps even more importantly, you can learn to love providing your physiology with the experiences and substrates that it needs to thrive. If you're having trouble getting yourself to do what you know you should do to ensure that your future years are healthy ones, or you keep beating yourself up for not having enough willpower to make healthier choices, send me a message through my website at healthcouragecollective.com or email me directly at healthcouragecollective@gmail.com, and let's get you loving the same things that are best for you so that you can look forward to a healthy future while enjoying every minute of your present. Next week will be episode 199, and we're going to talk about resetting your set point. Let's start playing on another level, just because we can. Until then, reduce your chances of getting Alzheimer's, cancer, or chronic pain in the future, and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.